Yo, 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 can you guys hear me? Drop it in the chat if it's hot. How are we doing on time? Pretty good. There we go. Check, check, 1, 2. All good? Okay, cool. Side, this one. Hello, internets. You guys good? Can you hear me? Drop it in the chat if you're good. And we have audio. Thanks for your patience in the beginning. Streamlabs decided to just kill my sound for no reason. So, you know, always exciting when we do a live stream. Yeah? Good to go? Yeah. A little lower? Okay, cool. So what's up, guys? Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Liam Shai. I'm an Ableton certified trainer, DJ for like 20 years, music producer for like 15. A good deal of that spent in psytrance, but I've done a ton of stuff. Yeah, today we're going to talk about modular, we're going to talk about Ableton, and we're going to talk about kind of the power that can happen when you bridge those two worlds together. Sort of a best of both worlds approach. So that's kind of how I'm going to take this angle today. If you guys have any thoughts, any questions, drop them in the chat. My man Ben is over here. He's handling the chat. Amazing guy. Thank you, Ben. He will be responding to any questions you guys have. If you need anything lower, louder, quieter, hotter, whatever, let Ben know. He'll take care of it. He's running the show over there. And then I will just kind of get into it. So this is kind of an interesting workshop because it's both an introductory workshop and a beginner's workshop, but it's also kind of an advanced workshop at the same time. So wherever you are in your kind of musical journey, I think you're going to get something out of today's session. So I will do a little bit of an intro to modular for those who are new to modular. But then for those of you who are more experienced, I think there's going to be some really cool workflow stuff and technique and theory that will appeal to you as well. So we're going to kick things off. I got my notes, so don't judge me, but I just want to keep on track. Otherwise, I'll ramble for 10 hours, and we're trying to keep it tidy here. So straight up off the bat, like one of the premises of this workshop was why you might consider modular in your workflow at all, right? Because we have DAWs, we have Ableton, we have Logic, we have all these tools. Why do we need this? Okay, so let's start there. Number one, and as somebody who comes from a DAW digital audio background, this is really fun. It's just super fun. It's engaging, it's exciting, it's visceral, it's hands-on. It makes you feel connected to the music and the sound in a way that I honestly just never really experienced with the digital sort of workflow. So just off the gate, like it's just super fun. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, I actually find sound design is easier on this. And I know it might look intimidating, right? There's a lot of knobs, there's a lot of buttons, there's a lot of wheels, right? All kind of stuff going on. But sound design in the DAW, personally, I've always just found it to be a bit more of a chore. Like it's not so enjoyable, and I'll wind up getting kind of guilty, like sort of hunting for presets, like, oh, I just need a bass line, I just need a patch, whatever. And kind of, you know, with this, you don't have that, you can't just get lazy, you know? But by that same token, it's not a chore, it's not work, it doesn't feel like work, it actually feels a lot more fun and like play. So that's awesome. Number three, it's a different mindset than looking at a computer. And for those of you who work day jobs, night jobs, in between jobs, whatever, a lot of us look at a computer 24/7, and then it's kind of like when you want to decompress and you want to make music, do you want to look at a computer again? It's kind of like, maybe, but I don't know. It can be kind of taxing, right? You need to do a lot of yoga if you're on the computer all the time. So the ergonomics and this whole kind of headspace, and it just gets you out of that and free of that. And you'll notice that even though I am using Ableton Live, there is a computer here. I don't look at the computer at all. It's all interfaced through my controller, which I'll get into later. So number four, it's a fantastic growth opportunity. Even for me as like a 15, 20-year veteran of music production and this whole kind of world, I learned so much when I got into modular, things that I had like kind of knew but didn't really care about, and concepts that were like, oh, that's important, but you know, it just doesn't really come to head as much in the DAW kind of workspace. And when you're in modular, you have to actually think about like, how do we create a synthesizer? Because we don't have a complete synthesizer a lot of the times, right? We have to build all of the modules from scratch. And so it just forces you to actually learn in a way that sticks. So it's a great growth opportunity. Number 5, last reason, it is a fantastic community. I have to say, just in the short time that I've been doing modular, which is really only since November of last year. So I'm less than a year old into the modular world and landscape. But I've just found like great Facebook groups, great communities, people who are willing to connect and chat and talk and share ideas. And I don't know, it just sort of like reinvigorated me into this kind of idea of a music production community in a way that I just didn't really, it's like, oh, you do Ableton, everybody does Ableton, you know. But it's like you do modular, it's like, oh, that's interesting, you know, that's unique, that's special. So that's pretty cool. So those are some of the pros, not all, but five pros. So I'm gonna give you 5 cons at the same time because, you know, there's a good chance maybe modular is not for everybody, and that's okay. So number 1 con, yeah, there's no presets, right? It's really difficult to save patches. That could be a pro maybe, but it's definitely from the point of view of creating a live set or creating an album or something where you want to recycle similar patches. You're gonna have to memorize them. You're gonna have to write them down. You're gonna have to kind of program your brain in a different way to be able to come back to those things, because there's, at least not in my system, there's no presets. Con number 2, and this is, we're just gonna get the elephant in the room, is very expensive. There's just no beating around the bush. Modular's not cheap. There are cheap options. There definitely are, and I'll get into that like a little bit later. Maybe if you're looking to get into modular, what some of those kind of starter kits could look like. But yeah, it's a money suck. There's just no beating around the bush there. So that's a con. That's definitely a con. Number 3, there's definitely a learning curve, right? I mean, you're not gonna just get this, open it up, and be off to the races. So you have to be prepared and okay with this idea that it could take you a year before you make anything that even sounds decently passable. For me, even with my experience, I would say it took me 10 months. Like basically from about until a week ago, I didn't make anything that sounded good. And then I made something that sounded good and I decided to make a workshop around it. So here we are. So there is a learning curve. Number 4, you have to kind of learn to be okay with the imperfections, right? It's not the DAW, we're not drawing automation. I come from a background of being very surgical, a lot of precision, right? Everything that I do in the digital space has so much thought around it. And with this, it's much more of an organic process. So that could be good, but it could be a con if you kind of struggle with that and you want everything to be perfect. So you have to be okay with imperfections. Number 5, it can be difficult to recreate live. That's true. However, what I'm hopefully going to accomplish today, and this is really, and we'll get into this, the high level of what my kind of like thought process is all about, but it's really kind of about creating this bridge between the studio and the stage, right? How do we write songs and craft songs when we're in our house, but that are already designed and built and optimized for live performance? But it can be difficult to recreate live because it gets, you know, it's one thing to do a 10-minute set. It's another thing to do a 60-minute set or, you know, longer. So anyway, all right. So moving on, I'm just gonna give you guys a very brief, for anybody who's new here, like what is modular synthesis? What is this all about? How is this different from regular synthesis? So regular synthesis, right? It generally revolves around this concept of partials and overtones. Starting maybe from a pure fundamental, like a sine wave, 440 hertz, and then adding harmonics, right, through square waves, sawtooth waves, all kinds of in-between waves, right, every kind of complex wave that exists. And these harmonics form complex wave shapes, and they add depth and complexity, and sometimes they even have precise mathematical relationships, right, like the overtone series. Second harmonic vibrates twice as fast as the fundamental. Third harmonic vibrates 3 times as fast, right, as the fundamental, and so on and so forth. So that's the harmonic series. And so this idea of synthesis is really about sculpting these harmonics, right? That's really what synthesis is about. So it's going to either happen usually by, well, yeah, one or the other, either through addition or through subtraction. So through combining waves or through refining and filtering complex waves that you start with. And this is something that's known as East Coast versus West Coast synthesis, which, by the way, I actually hadn't heard about before I got into modular, but it's a huge, massive, like, ideology, and there's a lot of history behind it. Buchla, Moog, all these people, they've been a part of this idea of this concept in terms of how do you actually go about and construct your synthesis. So the way that I always kind of learned it in school is this idea of the Moog style, which is subtractive synthesis. You start with a complex wave shape, and then you filter it down, right? Oscillator, filter, amp, right? Your basic subtractive synth. That's how I always kind of learned it. But then there's the Buchla and the Surge style. By the way, the Moog style, that's East Coast synthesis, right? So when you hear that East Coast, West Coast, that's the East Coast style. The West Coast style is, and we're in San Francisco, so hey, is more of this kind of more, I don't almost want to say experimental, but Buchla / Surge style, which is about combining simpler wave shapes to create more complex, harmonically rich content, right? So rather than starting rich and filtering, you sort of start simple and build. And sometimes people refer to that as additive synthesis. Not exactly additive synthesis, but the idea is adding, right? So anyway, furthermore, last thing I want to say on this, if you're getting into modular, you might hear about 3U versus 4U versus 5U. Everything that you see here is 3U. This is the Doepfer standard, right? And it has to do with the height of each module, right? So most of your modules are going to be 3U. This has sort of become the accepted format, but you do come across the 4U format, which is Surge and Buchla. Those are going to be taller modules, and then you have the 5U, which is the Moog format. So anyway, okay. Let's get back a little bit to sort of some of the concepts about synthesis itself, and in particular, voltage control, which is really the heart of what this whole thing is about. This is what drives us, right? So if you're used to kind of like what I'm used to, which is sort of working with Midi, it's all about multi-instrument digital interface, right? You're sending these digital control messages for pitch, gate, velocity, right? All those sort of things, and that's how you control your synth. But by and large, in the modular world, we're working with an analog control voltage signal, and you do have digital modules. It's not to say that every module is analog, because they're not. There's a lot of digital modules. However, they're still analog voltage controlled. And voltage control can be thought of exactly the same way as MIDI. It's just a different way of communicating, and it's just basically how many volts of information are you sending to a particular module, and how is that module then going to interpret it, right? And that range typically is -5 volts to +5 volts. So you have a 10-volt range, and that could be for things like pitch, gate, triggers, all the things that you would normally control with MIDI, but you're just doing it with analog voltage. So luckily, unless you're designing modules, you don't have to worry too much about that. But there are MIDI to CV converters. I've got one right here. It's kind of tied in right here, but the CV OCD, I can take MIDI into that, and then I have 12 outputs, which are then 4 CV outputs, and then 8 gate outputs, which can be used to then control my device. My devices, my modules, I can sequence from my iPad, for example, or sequence from Ableton Live using a MIDI to CV converter, and there's a lot of modules that do that. So some of the basic CV functions you're going to come across can be pitch, gate, trigger, clock, LFOs, lots of other complex modulation. And then we also get a little bit more complicated because we can also mix audio levels and control voltage levels in the same signal path. So that's a common thing as well. And there's a lot to talk about there. So let's kind of transition to audio connections, because it's super important when you start to work in modular to kind of think about audio, running things in and out, how's it all going to hook up, how's it going to connect, and what are the sort of things you need to be aware of, because modular levels are super hot, and if you're not careful, they're about 2 or 3 times as loud as a normal audio signal that you're probably used to working with. So you could easily blow your ears, blow a speaker if you're not careful. So you want to kind of think about that as you're starting off and building your setup, is how are you communicating in and out between modular and either Ableton Live through your audio interface or through a traditional mixer. So one of the things, this is always very, standard introductory topic, is the concept of an AC coupled versus a DC coupled interface. And by the way, I've got a bunch of notes here that I'm kind of reading off just so I don't get lost, but I'm going to send you guys all of these notes. So everything I'm talking about, including there's going to be some links in there. So I've got links to, there's a good Sweetwater article about which audio interfaces have DC coupled and AC coupled outputs. If you're working in modular, you're going to want those DC coupled outputs, not only so you can just easily work between audio level and line level or modular level, but also so that you can then potentially use Ableton Live or whatever to control your modular rig with control voltage and actually send control voltage out those audio outputs. So in my particular case, and maybe we can go to the overhead shot here, I've got the Expert Sleepers ES8. It's probably, it's far away, it's blurry, whatever. It's just very simple interface. It's got USB, and I've got 4 inputs which go into Ableton Live, and I've got 8 outputs. And I can use that to either track and record my modular, or I can use the outputs to then send CV into my modular and actually sequence it from Ableton Live, which is really cool. Okay, So let's now kind of pivot. That's like your Modular 101. If you're new to Modular, there you go. If you've been in Modular for a while, you're ready for that section to be over. Let's go ahead and talk about how we can integrate our Modular setup with Ableton Live, because I think that's kind of where things start to get a little bit more interesting, and also where you have a lot of options, right? There's not necessarily one way to do things. There's a lot of different ways to do things. And I always want to kind of recommend you to start off by thinking about what's your goal and what's your vision, because everybody's vision is different. Maybe you want to do drums. Maybe you want to do synths. Maybe you want to do live performance. Maybe there's sound design stuff or atmospheres. There's all kinds of different like sort of goals that you could value. And those are going to kind of direct and drive the decisions that you make, right? They're not all going to be the same. So in my specific case, and that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today, I'm just giving you guys what I'm doing as an example in hopes of inspiring you and getting your kind of wheels turning, but it's by no means like I'm telling you this is how you should do it and this is the best way to do it. It's none of that at all. This is really just a starting point for more of like a larger conversation. Okay. Number one, you're gonna have to solve for clock. That's always gonna be your kind of first issue that you have to come across. And the reason for that is because you wanna have a nice sync between Ableton Live and your modular, right? If you're at 145 BPM in Ableton, you want your modular to also follow that tempo. And you don't want latency and you don't want any kind of jitter or any of these other things. There's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm not gonna get into every single way that you can solve the clock problem. But what I will tell you is the way that I solved the clock problem, and I don't know if I can even get this device. All my cables are really tight. I'm using a device called the ERM multi-clock. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a really obscenely expensive solution, but it starts and stops on a dime. I read a lot in the forums about people having latency issues, jitter issues, all kinds of sync issues between their DAW and their computer and their modular. And I have had none of these issues because of the ERM multi-clock. And actually, I'll show you guys really quickly how this works. We'll go over to Ableton Live and do this. And you'll see within Live, I have, hit A to get rid of all that. I have a clock sync channel, and then I have a ERM multi-clock plugin. And that's kind of the beauty of this, is I just drop this plugin in my session, and then I set my external output, and I just send it out to output 8, which I'm not using in my expert sleepers. And this is gonna send an analog signal into the ERM. Well, it's digital originally, and then the ERM can convert it either to analog, or in my case, I have it actually going to Midi DIN sync, which is then going into Pamela's new workout. Kind of complicated. There's a lot of clock stuff happening here, but essentially clock comes in, I can set it to go out. I have 2 actual clock outputs, one for just the clock and then one for start stop. So it'll actually start and stop in time with my session as well. So that's through a breakout cable called the Modular Whip that goes in to Pamela's new workout, and I have a clock in and I have a start stop in. And then from Pamela's new workout, I have now 8 clock outputs, which I can route throughout my session. And what's great about that is that I can set them at different rates, right? That's kind of where the magic comes in, because maybe I want some of them to just go at 145 BPM, but I might want some others to go half or a quarter or twice as fast or 4 times as fast or whatever. So I have that kind of flexibility using that solution. So that's kind of what I'm doing for clock. However you solve for clock, you will have to solve for it. It is an inevitable sort of part of the process in just getting everything to kind of sync and play nice together. So cool. So let's kind of get back into like what I'm doing and what this sort of session is about, because some of the stuff that you guys heard was coming from Ableton Live, and then some of what you heard was coming from the modular setup. And so I want to just I'll just tell you right now, the kick, live, the bass, live, Serum, actually, all the percussion, all the drums, live. They were actually just, well, the kick and most of the percussion were one-shot samples that I used, that I programmed with Midi using Impulse, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And then then there was one kind of tribal drum percussion loop just for groove. Kick, bass, percussion, all live. We doing good? All good on the stream? Yeah, love you guys. Thank you so much. This track that I played for you guys, it might have sounded complex, but it was actually really, really simple. Then there's only 2 synth layers. One of the synth layers was live recorded from the module, but it was already tracked in. And then the second synth layer I do live. So more on that to kind of come. But the idea here is that, this is the part. This is the part where I tell you my vision. What's my vision? All right, so here it is. This is my vision, and it's not to say it's the best vision or the right vision, but it's the vision that works for me. One of the things that I love about modular is that it is unpredictable, right? There's a little bit of gentle chaos or a lot of chaos to it. And that to me is exciting. However, I've also seen live modular performances where there's too much chaos. It gets carried away. And then it's not danceable, you can't sink your teeth into it, and there's just too much change going on for you to even recognize what the song is. And so for me, the way that I'm kind of thinking about this in my own sort of workflow is that I want to create music in the studio that will easily transition into a live performance. So some of it has to be recorded. Some of it has to be the same. Every time you hear the track, there's going to be those elements that are the same, and that's the pre-recorded line of modular. That's the drums, that's the kick, that's the bass. However, what's happening to them is going to change, right? I did a lot of breaks with the APC40, and I'll explain how all that worked. I did a lot of different transitions and filters, and things come in and things go out, and all that's going to be unique and organic and kind of go with the moment. And then I have one element that is just another basically synth lead line, basically two synth lead lines that I'm doing completely 100% live, organic in the moment. And that is what's going to give us that sort of change and that exploration, and it's not going to be exactly the same, right? So that's kind of, to me, I think an ideal workflow, because now you have that balance, right? You have the balance of the chaos, but also enough sort of familiarity that people kind of can recognize the song and be like, oh, I love this song, this is great. And then also keeping the stuff in live really simple, right? I just basically have these 4-bar loops that are just going the whole time. It's nothing fancy. The kick doesn't change, the drums don't change, none of that changes from the audio or the Midi. It all is relying on me to change it live. And by the way, too, just as a segue, I did make a conscious choice not to tackle any drums live. So I have no live modular drums. And the reason for that is basically just kind of what I explained. I think it can be done better, easier, faster within live. And all this kind of tactile hands-on control that I can get using something like the APC40 is just unmatched from what I've seen in this sort of current modular offerings. So that's a nice workflow for me. So I like it. So that's kind of what you heard. And we will get into it, I promise. So do we get into it? Let's just get into it. Let's get into it. All right. So I'm going to break this set down for you guys and just kind of show you how I kind of created this set, what's happening in it, and sort of step by step. So first, I'm going to go over here into Ableton and just show you guys, if I turn the mic really, really quickly. Cool. All right, zoom out a little bit here. So as I kind of promised, I have a kick drum, which you can't see because it's just being routed from my impulse channel here. So I have the kick pulled out onto a separate track. Just makes it easier for me to process, and then I have my own channel so I can pull the kick out separately. Then, as I said as well, I have one modular line, which was pre-recorded. Let's see, if I solo that, can you guys hear it?
We got nothing.
Yeah, you guys hear it?
Yeah.
Great. Let me get my headphones. So yeah. So that whole line is pre-recorded, and that's going to just live in the track. If I release this track, it'll be in there, right? And if I perform live, it'll be in there. That's the anchor that kind of glues the whole thing together. But, and then the bass, literally, I mean, it's just a loop, right? I can play with it live to create the interest that I need. The drums, again, just a MIDI loop that I programmed.
That's noise coming out of the master.
Oh yeah, it's kind of noisy. It's very noisy. The modular is a bit noisy, so you do have to kind of watch for that. And then I've got just this sort of tribal drum loop here. There we go. And my filter. Right, so we've got our tribal drum loop. We've got our drums, which are pitched up. There we go. There's our drums, which I can control with one knob. And you'll see why. This is why I use impulse. In fact, I'll just show you guys. Since we're here, you see impulse, and everybody uses drum racks in live, which drum racks are cool, but impulse, right? You see I can transpose this to create instant sort of buildups and breakdowns and energy. And not only can I transpose it, but I can also gate it. So now I have a nice tight drum rack, not a drum rack, impulse. And then when I want to really let it rip, I open it up. Probably at some point I'm going to replace this with FM synthesis drums, but you get the idea for now. So there we go. So I've got the drums, I've got the groove. I have the rhythm effects, which, yeah, this modular is noisy. I'm going to just turn this off for now. So all of the sort of rhythmic effects are basically handled by stutter edit, and that's what I'm doing on the crossfader. So essentially, I have all of my channels routed to this dry channel. You'll see here, instead of audio 2 going to master, they go audio 2, 8 dry, 8 dry, 8 dry, 8 dry, 8, well, except for the modular, because I like to have one thing not getting stuttered. So let me just show you guys really quick. So everything's going to this dry channel, and then I have the dry and the wet on a crossfader. You see here, I'll just move these so they're close together. So dry, wet, that's my routing. And then I use the crossfader here to cut between A and B, and then the wet channel, of course, has stutter edit. So that's how I can do those kind of live breaks with the crossfader, which is honestly super performative and super duper fun. And we have to launch a clip, so I'll show you. We have different clips with different rates. And you'll notice a little bit of filtering is also happening as well, because nothing makes a break work like pulling out all the low end so that when the low end comes back, it is more satisfying. So that is done just very simply. Let me just close this. This is just it. I only have 4 clips. It's really not that much. And it's literally just a MIDI note. C1 for my quarter notes, C#1 for my eighth notes. And this is all programmed when we go over into stutter edit, which is designed to actually receive on a particular MIDI note channel. And the way that we route that within live is we just have just a random, this is just a random instrument track, right? Like just a random MIDI track with no instruments on it. But what I did here, this is how you connect it. My computer is running a bit funny right now because of the screen recording. But if you guys can see this right here, the MIDI 2 is going into the wet channel, and then from there it's going into stutter edit. So I'm just routing these MIDI clips directly to feed into stutter edit, and then I can launch those clips on the fly and get those various different rhythmic variations. And that's it. That's all that's going on here. Kick, 1 lead pre-recorded, bass, drums, some percussion, my rhythmic effects, live modular, and then just my clock. There's nothing really to it. But that's kind of what's so exciting about this, is that with sort of some creativity, and yeah, there we go. I'm all over the place here. With some sort of creativity and some kind of live interactive processing, you can make it super fun and exciting and feel very complex when there's actually not that much going on. So let me actually transition and show you guys now how the sort of patches worked, how the both patches actually, because they're very, very similar, in fact. And they're also very, very simple patches. In fact, I'm actually just gonna adjust the camera really quick. So give me 2 seconds, guys. I'm gonna punch in on the modular gear so you guys get a good view. Okay. Boom. All right, cool. All right, can everybody see our beautiful Renee here? So Renee is really kind of where it all starts. Well, technically Pamela's new workout is where it starts. And if you're familiar with Pamela's new workout, I just replaced the black panel. So normally it's silver. I have to have all black, everything. So anyway, so Pamela's new workout is just sending clock into the clock input of Renee. And by the way, and I'm not gonna keep this too loud here, but if we just play this a little bit. Let's see here. How does that sound? In fact, what I'm going to do, I will just solo this. Here we go. Should be hearing something. Here, hold on. Okay, let's do this. Boom, boom. Is it record enabled? Yeah, it's record enabled. I messed something up when I was. Oh, I got my clock. My clock's good. Everything's good. Modular. Oh, I turned it off. Oh, and I repitched this during my set. So, all right. So the idea here, and let me make this a little bit less weird for a second. Yeah, so you guys can hopefully see that. It's tracking the melody, and I can adjust these knobs to sort of change the pitch of whatever I want that melody to be. It's very simple. It's literally actually only a 2-bar sequence, and that is the hook, essentially, because I kind of am a big believer in hooks for both the pre-recorded part and the part that I was doing live. They're very similar Renee sequences here. And let's get into it. So, okay, so clock goes into here, 145 BPM, then what happens? We select some notes, right? Pitch, okay, that all makes sense. Select a scale, right? I can quantize it. But then what happens? Well, then what we do is we take our XCV out, and then we go into the 1 volt per octave input. Oh, where am I looking? I'm looking here. You guys can still see. Yeah, and then I go into, actually, here, we'll lift this camera a little bit here. Let's do this. Okay, great. So XCV out, and then I go into the 1 volt per octave input on DPO. DPO is an oscillator. There's 2 sides to it. It's a dual oscillator. So I'm literally just using a sawtooth wave. That's it. 1 sawtooth wave. It's like the least fancy thing ever, but it sounds great. So the way that we then kind of control this is I take my sawtooth out and I put it into Javelin, which is a WMD device, which is both a VCA and an envelope generator. And one of the things that you'll hear when you first start to get into modular is that you need VCAs, which are basically voltage-controlled amplifiers. Kind of boring in and of itself, but they're cool. They can be used for modulation, which is good. But I like to kind of combine things a little bit, you know. So I got an envelope generator and a VCA, and what that allows me to do is kind of sculpt the sound. So let me play this again. So with this, right, I can kind of gate the sound, right? This is literally, what's the amp envelope, which if you're familiar with normal traditional synthesis, same kind of thing, right? Attack, decay, sustain, release. But with one trick up its sleeve, which is that Javelin also has a looping function, which is kind of fun. So you can kind of loop it and get your own little sort of sub-rhythms going on, which sometimes sound good and sometimes sound bad, but it's kind of a fun little effect. So, okay. So we got the sawtooth coming out, it's going into the envelope, and then where does it go from here? Well, then it actually goes just straight into my filter, and if you think about basic subtractive synthesis, what we all grew up on, right? Oscillator, filter, amp. So we've got our oscillator, we've got our amp, and so now we go to the filter, and that's the last step before we actually go out to the mixer. And so for the filter, I'm using this absolutely phenomenal filter called QPOS by Make Noise, which is a stereo filter that has a really interesting trick up its sleeve, which is that it will adjust the cutoff frequency based on the even and odd harmonics rather than just sort of a normal traditional filter, which will just cut all frequencies equally. This will actually detect the input signal and determine what frequencies are coming in, and then create these even and odd harmonic sweeps that you can then boost or cut, which is just super fun and very musical and very psytrance. It's like the most psytrance thing I've ever heard in my life. So I'm addicted to this filter. I love it. So yeah, so that's it. So we come out the amp, we go into the filter, we come out of the filter, by the way, and this is all mono so far. A lot of Eurorack stuff is mono, but there is more stereo happening. But this has actually 2, 4, 6, 8 stereo outputs. So even if you send a mono signal in, it has this kind of stereo ability. It will separate the frequencies and divide them up amongst the left and the right channel, which is great. And now I can take, and I'm in this case using my high pass outs straight into my mixer. This is, by the way, this is a Tesseract Eurorack mixer, how I can kind of connect between modular level and normal audio level if I'm playing a live show, for example. So this then has like normal outputs. I've got 4 stereo channels, which I can mix and match. And then it also has sends, which is really, really handy as well. But before we get into the sends, there's one last part of this patch, which I want you guys to pay attention to, which is this one up here. It is called Simple ADSR. This is by Blue Lantern. So we have our amp envelope, but I also have a filter envelope. And the reason for the filter envelope is to create movement within the filter that happens organically and changes over time. So rather than a sort of static filter, even if I'm not touching the filter, there's going to be different levels of change. Also does looping. So you can hear now the simple ADSR is affecting the filter cutoff. And not only that, but I have it clocked over here to pressure points so that I can rhythmically change that, multiply it by 2 or divide it by 2 in real time. So that's really fun because it's kind of nice to be able to, that's all courtesy of Pam's, by the way. You can do that through menu diving, but it's nice just in a performative way. You guys are probably sensing a theme here. I like to produce music in the way that I like to perform live, right? It should be very performative. Things should be just very easy, very musical, already mapped out. It does take more work in the beginning to pre-program it, but then in the end, you get that nice reward of being able to just quickly kind of morph and jump through different rhythmical variations in a way that's fun and musical. Last thing about this patch, and then I'll move on, which is that there are some sends, which we can hear going through my Day mixer here, which basically is just controlling a send into Echophone and into my Mimiophone, which is doing kind of a pitch shifting kind of delay sort of thing. Not a lot of effects, actually, and this is something that I actually kind of harp on because I see a lot of people when they're sort of starting off, my headphones are like huge, thank you. It's like 10-gallon gas cans on my head. I see a lot of producers early on in their journey sort of drowning their tracks in reverb and delay, and everything just sounds so much better with reverb. But I'm a huge proponent, actually, of keeping things pretty much completely dry, or as dry as possible, because all reverb is going to do is muddy up your mix. It's just going, if you have everything dry, your mixes are going to be so much better. Everything's going to translate so much better across multiple sound systems and dance floors. I do like effects, but the way that I like to use effects is like, oh, bring it in, bring it out, right? Bring it in, bring it out. Oh, you get a little sprinkle, right? You get a little splash of magic, but I don't want to drench the sound, right? And kind of lose all the definition and the edge to it, and the loudness too, because if you don't have any effects, you can actually get a louder mix at the end of the day. And everybody knows louder's better, right? You heard it here first. If you're not redlining, you're not headlining. Okay, just kidding on the last part. All right, so moving on, and I want to get to kind of Q&A because we're kind of almost at time here. I think I actually covered most of this stuff. This was kind of Red Bull sort of session, so sorry if this was very fast. There's a lot of ground to cover. This is a complex topic, but I wanted to try to keep it to an hour and just show you guys what I'm doing, what I'm working on, maybe inspire you if you're new to modular or you're thinking about getting into modular. Get inspired to kind of get into it and see where this journey kind of takes you. Because for me personally, it's completely revolutionized the way that I make music and the way that I, plan on performing. I haven't been performing much, due to pandemics and things like that. But absolutely, I'm so pumped and excited to kind of take this out onto the road and see what happens on sort of live dance floor experience. So yeah, I think with that, I'm gonna just wrap it up. Oh, very last thing, I'll just give you guys the quick APC 40. Can we see the APC? Yeah, cool, great. All that's happening up here, I have my kick, I've got my recorded modular, I've got my bass, I've got my drums, I've got my percussion, I've got my MIDI effects, which is just for the breakdowns, right? I've got my live modular, and that's literally it. And then I've got my master. And also, you'll notice how I can just slam all my faders. That's very important. The reason that I can do that is because I went and I put utility plugins on all these tracks. So I mixed with the utility. I put the faders on full, right? Normally you'd be clipping, but I like to do it like this because faders are very performative again, right? I want to slam the fader. I don't want to have to oh, where was my mix, right? I just want to hit it. I 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 want to go big. I want to come home, right? Big movements. I don't want to have to think, right? You need to kind of dumb it down in a sense so that it's just like almost anybody could play with it without knowing anything about how it works. And that's kind of it. I've got filters, just low pass filters on the top. And then I've just got this knob here. I've only got 2 knobs actually. I've got 6 more knobs I could have programmed. This knob here was the tension and the release on the drums. Let's see. Here, we can play the drums. Can we play the drums? Yeah. Yeah. You guys hear that? Gate my drums, bring them back, and then pitch shift to the drums. Right? And that's for all my drums, actually. Not the percussion, but yeah. So that's really fun. And then the other thing that I have here on this one, since I wasn't using channel 8, is I have it set up as a kind of global filter for most of my sounds, not all my sounds, but I can filter out a bunch of my sounds in one kind of fell swoop, which is really good for them being kind of, dramatic. Right? That's it. Right? Crossfader, filters, volume, a couple of effects for the drums for creating tension, and that's it. But that's actually why I like this controller so much, the APC40. It's very performative, right? It's got faders. I have the force, I have the push, I have all these different things, but the APC40 is always going to be my favorite controller because it's got freaking faders, man, and you can just bang on these faders all day. And to me, the fader is the only element that is actually truly musical. I don't actually find knobs musical at all. They're very arbitrary, and you don't know where you are, and it's not good. So anyway, that's kind of the whole setup. So let's go ahead and take questions. That was a lot, but thank you guys so much for bearing with me. And Ben, is there any questions in the chat?
Yes, there's a question from Steve Baker.
Yeah.
Steve asks, did the cable between the ERM and PAMs have a special name?
Modular whip. Yeah. I had to buy a separate cable called the modular whip, which takes my clock output from the ERM, and it was only about $10. But it doesn't come with it. Also, by the way, this is a $700 freaking. I'm a little mad about how expensive this stupid thing is, but it works great. But $700, and it doesn't even come with the cable. Come on, breakout cable, give me it. Yeah. Anyway, that's what you need. They have them on Perfect Circuit and all kind of places. So probably Perfect Circuit. That's where I bought mine. Good question.
Good Carmen says thank you.
Thank you guys. Yeah. Hit me with your questions. Any questions? No questions? Oh, don't be shy. There's always one question. You know what? I'll just answer the one question that most people usually ask, which is, if you're thinking about getting into modular, what maybe would be the first module that you would buy? So for that, what I would recommend for anybody who's thinking about getting into it, I would recommend the Behringer Neutron. Normally it's red. It's very ugly, actually, but you can buy these different faceplates. I put on blue side cheeks, much nicer. I bought this for $200 on Craigslist, right? New, they sell for $300. It's not fully modular, but it's semi-modular, which is great, actually. And this will give you kind of that sort of get your feet wet and get into, is this something that is fun? Do you like it? Help you learn and just kind of get a feel for whether or not maybe modular is for you without spending all your money and being sad. So there you go. There's that one. Other questions?
Free software sense?
Free what?
Software sense?
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I don't know about, well, free. What do you mean, just in general?
Yeah, I mean
Podolsky. Podolsky. That is by Yuhi, great software designer. Makes a fantastic couple of free plugins, Triple Cheese, and they also make Zebra and Diva and paid plugins. But Podolsky is probably my number one free fat analog sounding VST. It sounds fantastic. It's got a great manual, and you can get a huge range of sounds on it, and it's free $99. Also, not your question, but just on a related note, another way to kind of maybe get your feet wet is to try out Eurorack. If you're not familiar, it's a sort of virtual modular interface in your computer. You can even test out real modules that exist, right? Things that you can buy, try before you buy even, which is really, really cool. So Eurorack, if you want to kind of just get a software start and see, and a lot of those are free. Actually, most of them I think are free, but there's some paid add-ons.
Steve has another question.
Yeah, Steve, hit me.
Does the ERM affect Ableton's built-in latency compensation or channel delay?
I think they must be working together because I shit you not, Steven. I'm sorry, I cussed, and I wasn't going to cuss on the stream, but this is amazing. I can load up even my live, by the way, and here, I'll show you guys. Actually, and this is a good, let me move my mic. This is a good point. Normally where this whole thing falls apart, right, is when you have plugins. By the way, this was my live modular recording sort of signal. I can't talk right now. Chain. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. This is my plugin chain. I have a ton of plugins. Look at all these plugins that I was running live. This is also, by the way, a great argument for why I like to marry the world of modular and DAW. I've got an LFO tool. I've got a compressor. By the way, modular levels, they can kind of tend to be all over the place. So I compress the crap out of them to just make sure everything just stays in the box. And I want to sit it in the mix and I don't want it to move. I've got a compressor. I've got an OTT. Then I've got a utility. Then I've got a stereo tool doing some stereo imaging on it. Then I've got an EQ. Then I've got a glue compressor. Then I've got my live filter. Then I have another LFO tool. Steve, you get down here. I have no latency. It's perfect. That's why I bought a $700 Magic box. That's the only justification I have for it. It works flawlessly, and even with a ton of plugins, live recording, no latency. So there you go. Other questions? That's it. Cool. Well, really quick, last thing I'll say before I go. I wrote up my little 10-page sort of document here of notes and talking points and all that. I will actually email that out to anybody. And there's some links and stuff in there too. So if you want to sort of refresh what we talked about today or explore further. But the only thing is make sure you're signed up to my email list, because the way that like the laws work and everything, I can't actually email you, even if you sign up for this course. But you didn't sign up for the email list, I won't actually be able to email you. So if you guys want the sort of the notes and stuff like that, and I'll wait a day before I send them out, make sure just go onto the website, sign up for the email list, keep in touch, liamshai.com. Thank you guys so much, and I hope to work with you or meet you or hang out with you or get on a dance floor with you at some point soon, and just stay safe, stay well. And I see Ben typing. If there's another question, I'm happy to answer it.
Steve has another thought.
Yeah.
He got his modular synced, but as soon as he changed or added some plugins, the sync goes off. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very common issue. That's the most common issue.
So ERM sounds like it could be the solution.
It worked for me. It's from all the research I did, it's the best solution for this. It's just rock solid, no latency. Every other solution I've read about on forums and Modular Grid and Muff Wiggler and every other sort of personal encounter, people struggle, even just with using PAMs straight out of live, because there's a way to sort of sync it directly. But this solved all latency problems. It's rock solid, no issues. So yeah, it's expensive, but if you want that, then it's there. So cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, I hope you guys keep in touch. Feel free to drop me a line, send me a message, keep me posted on your music, on your adventures, on your travels, on your projects, all the good things. Maybe not so many travels these days, but yeah, and hopefully I will see you guys. We're going to do another workshop next month. I'm bringing in my buddy Hex Mode. He's going to do a live techno modular demonstration. That is the 24th, also at 4 p.m. It's a Thursday. So if you guys are around, would love to have you. The signups are already open on my website, liamshai.com. Free, as always. So I would love to see you guys, and thank you so much for joining me. Liam Shai, out, party.